All right, so this is the big data today, and it's a very slight decline, 0.3%. We still have nearly 8 million South Africans without jobs in this country. But because analysts had expected no change and there was a small decline, the rand strengthened from a low of 1927 today to around 1917 or so just after that news. Let's look at this from a Labour perspective. We're joined by SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi now. Mr. Vavi, thank you for being with us. Your response, it's a small decline, but it's something. Are you pleased?
Well, there's absolutely nothing to write home about a 0.3%. The only encouraging sign is that it is something that seems to be a trend, even if it is a 0.2, 0.3. It's a trend that is promising. But it's a trend that makes no difference whatsoever to the crisis that we are facing. In our view, despite the 0.3%, the ticking bomb continues to tick. We are still risking an implosion in the country. You cannot have the situation as unfolded. Look, this is the reality, despite the 0.3. We still have to reach the same levels of people employed that we had pre-COVID. We now, almost 3 years down the line, we have not yet reached the same levels of unemployment or of employment as we had then. So we normally talk about that before there was a crisis, there was a crisis. Before there was a crisis of post-1994 worsening unemployment, there was a crisis of pre-1994 extraordinary high levels of unemployment. But pre-1994, we now holding a position number one when it comes to a country with the highest levels of unemployment amongst industrializing and industrialized countries of the world. We hold position number one when it comes to youth unemployment in the entire world. And regrettably, the trend that are established since 1990 will show that the share of wages to the GDP continues to decline, despite every other rhetoric to the contrary, including the introduction of the meaningless national minimum wage. But the share of wages is on a decline, making South Africa now hold position number one in the whole world when it comes to inequalities. The levels of poverty in this economy are absolutely frightening, and on their own constitute a ticking time bomb. So
they are frightening, Mr. Vavi. They are incredibly frightening. Just for the sake of time, what can Labour do about this? And I ask because you've been very critical of government. You can tell us what you think needs to change. But some would say for these young people, I mean, we know that it becomes more and more difficult to get a job if you've been unemployed for years, even if you have a degree or some sort of training. What can we do to get young people in that first job? Some people argue the labour laws are too tight. We're not encouraging small businesses, big businesses, anyone to just give those young people a chance to get some experience.
Well, that's not a proper diagnosis of what we are facing. The crisis we are facing is structural, Francis. We inherited a neo-colonial economy. We have continued with that neo-colonial economy that is based on extraction of our minerals without beneficiating them in South Africa and sending raw materials overseas, increasingly to China and India now. As long as we still have that structural problem of an economy dominated by mining, finance, and heavy chemicals, an economy that is deindustrialized, the manufacturing sector used to contribute 22% to the GDP is now down 12%. That's half of the capacity that we used to have is gone. And above all, we will not solve the crisis of youth unemployment with the dysfunctional and poor quality public education system in our country. When we cannot compete with the countries of the world when it comes to ability to read with an understanding at grade 5, and we come at the back of the queue, we will not be able to solve the crisis, because as we're now moving into the information technology age, we are being left behind. And that's why we have this army of unemployed young graduates, unemployed people who have been chucked out of the system, who are losing hope. And that's where the ticking time bomb concept is emanating from.
So can we make it really practical and to challenge you again, talk about beneficiation. So you bring the gold up, or we want people making gold jewelry, say, or using metals. But those skills right now are in India and other places. If you were a huge jewelry making company that could come and impart skills, would you want to come to South Africa? Would you want to grow here, given that we have some of the worst labor company relations in the world?
You wouldn't come here, indeed, you're right, Francis, and you will go elsewhere where there is a capacity to beneficiate and to manufacture. And that's exactly what Labour have been saying for the past 30 years. Can't we build an industrial capacity? Can we build new training institutions? Can we ensure that the Skills Development Act system that generated these billions that are sitting and idling and being used by the entrepreneurs for the benefit of themselves instead of workers is turned around to ensure that there is a better levels of training? Can we go back to the system of apprenticeship in the country? Can we overhaul the education system and make a proper link between the economy and some of the advantages? Why don't we have universities, for example, in the former Transkei, in the Northwest? I see now that Northwest is now sitting with 53% unemployment. And yet it is sitting with the second richest land, together with the former Transkei, in the entire world. Why is there no university in the Northwest and in the Transkei to train our people on agriculture and on using the land, but more importantly in the Northwest? Why is one of the richest provinces in the country, when it comes to mineral resources, suddenly finding itself with 53% of unemployment?
All right, we have to leave it there, Mr. Vavi. I'm so sorry, just for time.
To address.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your response to those unemployment numbers. If you missed it, unemployment falling very slightly to 32.6% from 32.9%. That was SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi